what are some of the reasons you believe they're coming now more so than ever? Because there are so many people coming out with their experiences and things like that. Why do you think it might be happening more now than, say, 20 years ago?
I think it's because it's time.
Welcome back to another episode of Awaken Minds podcast. I'm your host, Natalie, and today, unfortunately, Jimmy couldn't attend due to illness, but the show must go on because today's guest is Mary Rodwell. For those of you who do not know, Mary is Australia's #1 leading ufologist researcher. She is an expert and founder of ACERN, Australian Close Encounter Research Network. She's also the co-founder of Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. Mary is an international UFO researcher, lecturer, and author of the books The New Human, Awakening to Our Cosmic Heritage, and Awakening How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life. We're going to unpack that in today's episode, but currently Mary is an international leading researcher of encounters with non-human intelligence, giving lectures all around the world, and I am excited today to welcome to the show Mary Rodwell.
Right, I'll give a very brief overview for those that may not know. I trained in as a nurse. I was a registered nurse and a midwife when I first started work. So it wasn't till after I had my kids that I ended up working in counselling in a medical practice, because I had been introduced to counselling and I quite liked the philosophy of working with people before they become ill. And obviously a lot of emotional and psychological issues come from, disease comes from that and illness comes from that. So I love the philosophy of that, but it did expose me to a lot of interesting experiences, because there were always those that had what I call more out of the box experiences, where they would be saying, my dad is always there. I feel him and he gives me messages and this kind of thing, which opened up a lot more with me, I think, than just the standard, relationship counseling or whatever. I've always been a seeker, I think, right from a small child. I've always wanted to know what it's all about, the big picture. If it was weird and wonderful, I ended up having a book on it, usually. It didn't matter what it was. If it was weird and wonderful, it fascinated me. So I've always been keen to understand a greater reality. The bottom line was, I think, when I came to Australia, I made a distinct decision to stay with counselling and not go back into nursing or midwifery. And I worked in grief and bereavement for a number of years. And what was fascinating again is not only those that were facing, in hospice, facing their mortality, which got them questioning about, is the life after death, and would ask me my views or whatever, what did I think, but also people in deep grief, where they would have profound experiences, and some of them would experience maybe somebody who's passed on and had experiences around it. So again, it opened up life after death. It opened up consciousness. It opened up what is the journey of the soul. And this became more and more of a fascination, because I think we all want to know what happens when we die.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that I never came across anything at that point to do with extraterrestrial reality or anything. It was more about the spirit and soul journey. I
Yeah.
learned about past lives, and I read a number of books on that, which conflicted with my religious beliefs at the time, which I was letting go of gradually anyway. So it was challenging those religious beliefs, the dogma that goes with religion, was
Yeah.
fitting for me anymore. On top of that, I ended up having a few past life regressions and whatever. And with that, I learned hypnosis, because I wanted to also find out more from other people. So I became
Right.
a clinical hypnotherapist. And then I was offered a chance to learn more about how you open up. Some go and do Reiki, some, all sorts of different kind of healing modalities. But I did it in a context of everything, not only remote healing, but learning about how to connect to other intelligences, for want of a better word, whether you call them spirits, whether you call them ETs, it doesn't really matter. But it gave me a sense of the actual reality of this. It wasn't just a gift for certain people. I realized that everyone has that capacity, even if they're not aware of it. So that was when I met my first experiencer, Ellis Taylor, who now lives in England. And he said, Mary, I've heard you're open-minded. For this, there's no support groups. For this, they just think you're a loony. And was explaining about waking up with marks on his body, his family having experiences, his partner, the children, going up on spacecraft. And this was the first I'd really had come to see me, although I'd read 2 books at the time prior to that, which I always think the universe helps you out. And it was very only a few months or weeks prior to that, I'd read 2 books that told me about ET contact. And one of them was Dr. John Mack, the Harvard professor of psychiatry, who wrote the book Abducted: Human Encounters with Aliens. And he had done the psychological testing, he'd done hypnosis, and was convinced ultimately that this was a reality. He wrote, as I say, the abduction side, Abduction: Human Encounters, but also Passport to the Cosmos was his second book. I also read Communion, which was Whitley Strieber's book of his own experiences. So I'd got an insight this could be very much a reality, but I didn't know a great deal about it until Ellis came along. Within 2 weeks, someone else came along with experiences. I ended up doing a support group with 12 people turning up. And it's since then I've worked with about 3,500 across the globe from all over the place. It doesn't matter, Brazil to wherever.
Oh, sorry, I'll stop you there really quickly. I think it's absolutely fantastic that you went straight in the deep end, not really having much knowledge on what you're getting yourself into, yet you took it upon yourself to help these people in any way that you could. And so starting support groups, getting as much information as you can, that just blows my mind. And I'm actually really grateful to be able to sit here with you and have this conversation, because I think it's really important to understand how to be human. And I learned that from you this morning when I was doing a little bit of research. And we really truly don't know how to be human, because when we're born into this reality, we're programmed, we're taught to be a certain way, answer questions based on their curriculum. And, we get out of school and we wonder, well, what do we do now? And that's where all of the questions come, like, who are we? What are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go? And then we have Mary Rodwell, who just dives straight deep into the unknown, not having any idea of how to understand this, but you took it upon yourself to actually understand the knowledge and go forward and help people. So it's absolutely incredible. And so I guess one of my first questions for you, Mary, how did the people within your field take this direction you were going in? What was it like? Did you get any backlash? What was that like for you?
Well, I was, prior to this, I had been working in a Catholic counselling agency. But due to circumstances, I left that. I went into private practice, which gave me a lot more freedom. And what is quite fascinating is one of the young ladies in my first book, Awakening, who discovered at 19 that she was really an experiencer, because she told the doctors at 14 that she was seeing aliens, and he diagnosed her as schizophrenic, and she was on a cocktail of medication. She nearly took a suicided a few times because she felt so awful about it all and the medication. At 19, she watched a talk show on television, which they were talking about their experiences, and she realized that this was, in fact, a reality for her. Interestingly, then she contacted me, and her mother was a nurse. And her mother was very ambivalent about talking to, her daughter talking to this strange lady that's saying this could be real. And she was very, very anxious about it. So she said, "Where did you previously work?" And I told her about the Catholic counseling agency. She rang them up and she checked me out. And
Oh,
actually, my
wow.
boss, my manager that I used to work for, said, "Mary's absolutely on the line. She's credible. She's this, this, and this, and this." He'd realized at that point, because some at my previous work did know I was into all of this. But I got, glowing reports. So she actually then trusted her daughter with me,
Wow.
which is interesting. And interestingly enough, when I was in Perth, and I found this quite fascinating, the psychiatric emergency team had obviously someone within that that group or field had sent a few people to me, had referred them actually to me. Now, this is a psychiatric emergency team who are saying maybe some people are actually having experiences. We know this weird lady up in the hill.
Right.
But so on the whole, it's been quite interesting. When I was doing advanced counselling, which I actually took Ellis's case study with me because they were saying take a case study, and it was so bizarre and so weird. And I thought, well, it's someone who's come to me, it's someone who wants counselling. How do you view this? And it was a group, social workers, uniting minister, the whole range of different professionals doing advanced counselling. And I thought, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to take this case and see what they say, whether they think he's crazy or whatever. Do you know what was fascinating, Natalie? What was fascinating to me is nearly everyone in that group that heard the story started talking about being in haunted houses or having something that happened that was really weird or whatever. So nobody actually said to me, well, we think he's crazy. They were just
Mm.
saying, well, I've had a weird experience. And somebody else said, well, I had a really weird experience. So what it done is open up people to admitting they
Mm.
had experiences that weren't the norm. And this is the bottom line, when you finally, and it's about being, I think, authentic too, people start to own more of what is their truth when they hear that kind of information. It gives them permission to say, you know what, I've had some weird stuff happen. And you know what,
Right.
Natalie, everyone's had weird stuff happen.
Right.
Everyone. It's just they don't talk about it because it's weird and they don't want to be judged or they don't want to be thought of crazy or whatever. And this is the irony of this,
Mm.
is that we've got everyone having certain things go on they can't explain, but being too reluctant to admit to it because they might be thought of weird or strange or crazy or whatever. And this is the society we're in. Let's face it, you can't even say certain words now
Oh, right.
because we've got this, word police that say you can only say certain things, and it's nonsense
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it stops people from being authentic and being themselves.
How do you navigate through this reality with all the knowledge that you have? And I guess, I mean, in a sense, you kind of just answered it, but for me, I think it's quite difficult. I have nowhere near as much knowledge as you do, and it will take me quite some years to get there. But I really feel like when you're having a discussion with the NPC players, as you will, I've been there, we've all been an NPC, but how do you navigate when you're communicating with these types of people? I mean, would you say, in a sense, maybe lower your frequency in order to be that version of you for that moment to then going back to Mary today?
It is about working with what they're comfortable with and okay with. When I was trained as a counselor, it was like you meet the person where they're at. So,
Mm,
it's and even
right.
using the same language that they use. So, example, if I'm talking to a tradie, I'm not going to use academic language, for example. I You know what I mean? I'm going to talk like the tradie because I
Yeah.
know the kind of language that will be okay, that they'll understand. And one of my issues with is a lot with the metaphysical New Age is they're inclined to use very complex terms that they assume
Mm,
everybody will understand. And quite honestly, people are opening up, everyday people, they might, whatever they're doing
yeah.
for a profession or whatever, they may not be tuned into that kind of language. So what you're going to do is shut the door and they're not
Yeah.
talking about, for example, something like a Merkaba, your light body. Well, for some audiences, they'll get that. Other people think, what the hell's a Merkaba? And
Right.
it shuts them down. Your light body, it's one of your energies. You can change it to language that they understand. And so most of the time, I try and use what I call everyday language. It's like, for example, the connotations you get with someone, oh, they're psychic. Now, some people will switch off as soon as you say that. But if you say to them, you're highly intuitive then, aren't you? You sense things. Oh, yeah, yes, I do. So it's the same thing, but it's different language. So it's about finding the frequency, the language that fits for the individual that you're speaking to, so they can understand and not feel alienated, if for want of a better word, by language that makes them feel uncomfortable and they don't understand.
I love that you just said that because unfortunately Jimmy couldn't be here today. He's feeling a little unwell, but we often talk amongst each other, wondering, the spiritual community does have a lot of kinks in it, so to speak. Just like you said, the language in which they speak, a lot of people aren't going to understand it unless they've been on that similar journey themselves for years, I would say. But the average Joe is waking up, and that they're not going to appeal to the Merkaba, the light body, all of that stuff. So I really love what you just explained, and I think that it's important to share this with the spiritual community, because you don't have to wear all your crystals, your beads, and wear your linen, and sit and meditate like a Buddhist monk. You don't need to do that. We can really be our authentic selves and not take on that so-called spiritual demeanor. And so I really love that you just shared that. So thank you. I want to switch gears a little bit, Mary, and I want to ask you, on your journey, what are some of the modalities you can teach us, or not modalities, or could you go through all of the processes of abduction, like the first kind, the second kind, and kind of explain a little bit about that to the viewers?
Well, again, I'm going to keep it simple. The primary thing is, when you are having telepathic or interactions with these intelligences, it's C5. I don't use any of those terms because there is, again, people need to know a process. They need to know all those different things. In my questionnaire, it's not asking if you had a CE5 or whatever. What I'm saying to them is, have you ever felt different? Have you felt that you just don't belong? Do you feel you have knowledge that you haven't consciously learned? Are you aware or feel that you've got a mission or a purpose? Or, for example, do you feel energies? Do you see balls of light? Do you see space, what you think is spacecraft? Did you feel different after that experience? So I don't go into any real terms, more about what you're feeling and sensing. Were you really scared of things like, or have phobias around clowns, Santa Claus, owls with big eyes and what have you, because they're all screen memories, possibly, for this experience. So what I'm doing is going into their world and saying, are these things that you've experienced? Because otherwise they're looking at the standard way of looking at all of this. They can go into that and they can explore it if they want to, but not everyone knows even the terms. I remember a 60-year-old man contacting me saying he's had strange experiences all his life. And I sent him one of my questionnaires, which isn't your standard UFO questionnaire. It's not just when did you see the craft, for how long, and did you have missing time? It's actually saying, were you different afterwards and what happened? I remember sending this questionnaire to this 60-year-old, very much a, down-to-earth Aussie bloke. And he literally rang me directly after receiving the questionnaire. And he was in tears. And he said, how do you know about my life? Because the
Wow.
questionnaire triggered so much that he hadn't even himself realized was related to this. There are so many things related to this, the intergenerational side of it, the children that are different, all these kind of things that people in their own world haven't connected the dots. So for me, when it comes to somebody contacting me, first of all, let's connect some of the dots. And that's what the questionnaire, it's not for me, that questionnaire, it's for them. It's for them to say, oh, yes, I've always had this. Did you ever have dreams where they came true a few days later? They may not know the word is precognitive. And I'll say, oh, well, if you've had dreams and it's come true, yes, and it's really weird and I don't like it and what have you. Do you know there's a name for that? And I'll say, this is what it's called. And I said, and it's very classic with this experience that many people pick up on information about future events, different timelines. So it's about understanding not everyone is at the end of the journey here where they've spent years researching what's going on. They may just be waking up to the fact that this may be a reality. And what goes with that is isolation. Because as soon as you start to realize you're having things go on, your partner may not be okay with it, or your kids may not be okay with it, or your relatives may not be okay with it. And so you suddenly go into this isolation. If you follow that track, you're going to feel very much more alone and what have you. So there are all those things that go with it.
It's interesting that you brought up isolation. On my journey, and I can't really pinpoint the beginning of my own awakening, but I went through that phase of feeling alone, feeling not heard. But in that space was where the beauty actually happened, because I was meditating. I had the time to meditate. I could ponder a lot of things. I could really go onto YouTube and just do all the research while I'm in that space of, hermit mode, so to
Yeah.
speak. That's when I really learned a lot, when I was on my own, when I was really curious to the point where I almost didn't care what anyone thought at that point. It was, I need to know. So those of you who might be feeling alone, take this time to be kind to yourself and maybe even start to explore why you're feeling this way, and try to find ways to learn as much as you can in order to empower yourself, because I feel like we do need to come into our power in order to really know who we are. Because again, if you don't know who you are, it's really difficult to find your passion and your purpose in this place. And I do feel like the ET races that are coming down to help us are wanting us to figure out who we are, understand energy, understand the language of light, sound, and frequency, and all of these things. And so maybe we can dive down there, and maybe you can let the viewers know, what are some of the reasons you believe they're coming now more so than ever, because there are so many people coming out with their experiences and things like that. Why do you think it might be happening more now than, say, 20 years ago?
I think it's because it's time. What
Mm.
happened, I think, and much of those that are tapping in and communicating with these intelligences is because once we got the technology, um, which really could destroy the planet, they
Yeah.
became very active in making themselves known. And many military bases have had UFOs. And there's many researchers that have spoken about this. There was Robert Salas, for example, in America, in the 60s, because he said that the craft were outside the base, and then they'd decommissioned basically their missiles. And this has happened all over military bases, including one that was very close to where I used to live in England, Bentwaters in Suffolk. They actually, again, and there's lots of Left at the East Gate is one of them by Larry Warren and what have you, talked about his part in that, where the craft landed in Rendlesham Forest. And of course, the craft were also seen outside the base, the US base. They decommissioned the missiles. And of course, none of that could be admitted because of the Cold War, and that it took away, obviously, the security or the deterrent as they saw it. I think these intelligences were very aware of the dangers of us, because it's like handing a 3-year-old a loaded gun without the 3-year-old working
Yeah.
out that can kill people. And I think this is why they've made themselves very much more obvious. But not only that, they've been doing rapid upgrades of humanity's consciousness. And this is more prevalent than people realize. This isn't isolated people here and there having the odd experience. I believe it's not only thousands or millions. I believe it's billions of people that are having experiences. They may not all attribute it to extraterrestrial contact. They may see it as purely spiritual in the sense of its angels, or it's a religious figure or whatever. And for somebody who's very religious, they may see a light being as an angel, whereas someone who isn't religious would say it was a light being, the same. But ultimately, what they're doing is expanding human consciousness now more than ever. And that's why people are waking up, because it's time. It's time for us to realize we're not alone in the universe, and that we've got all these different intelligences. And what a lot of them are doing also is incarnating as human. So, people are relating to the word hybrids, for example, because they feel very connected to a particular star system, whether it's the Pleiades or Arcturus or Andromeda, or from another dimension. I remember a 10-year-old saying that he came through a portal in the sun from another dimension. So we also have that, all these individuals coming in with that higher consciousness of who and what they are. And so they're not only helping from one level, they're helping literally on our own piece of solid 3D reality.
I wanted to bring up an interview you did about 10, well, not an interview, it was a lecture you did about 10 years ago. And you were bringing on this girl who she she had many visitations and communication with these beings, and she would do light work and healings on people. Um, and you were talking about how it's not that she was learning to connect with these ET races more so, but they were teaching her how to be human. the new human of the new earth. So maybe we can dive a little bit into that. But also, I understand you are talking to the children that have autism, Asperger's, and going into the new way of communication for the new earth. Maybe we can dive into a little bit of that and your findings on that.
Yes, I think I know. I did two DVDs. One of them was Rochelle Deila, who actually was learning how to be human. A lot
Right.
more of the new generations of human that have been incarnating in the last 20, 30, 40 years or whatever feel they have either a dual consciousness or they're actually a hybrid. And what that means is some of them have to learn to be human. In fact, a 10-year-old I've mentioned a number of times that explained to me that it was his first Earth incarnation. He came from a planet where he was blue, and that he's come to this central core of this planet to help with the environment and pollution, for example. So this is the kind of awareness we're talking about. Another child very recently that I'm going to be showing when I speak in Central Queensland in a few weeks' time is about a young lady who's 7 years old and sees herself as part human and part blue avian. And she's actually drawn a picture of herself as the human self, but part of her blue. And she explains how she does healing. And she was doing the sounds, the language and the movements. And she explains that what she's doing is also activating the person's healing abilities as well. She explained it, you know. So what I'm saying is that these children are now being born fully aware of who they are, fully aware of their mission and their purpose, just like this young 7-year-old that's explaining why she's here. And that, you know, some call themselves hybrids. There's another wonderful little 8-year-old explained to me that she was part water being, part human, and that she came from a water planet, and that she explained that when she looks in the mirror, she's actually seeing water being rather than human when she sees herself. And explain
Wow.
when she hears music, she not only hears the music, she actually hears the frequency and goes with the frequency to the person who's created the music and understands the emotion and feelings that go with that person as well. So she takes it to a whole new level of multidimensional experience.
Well, it sounds a little bit like a life review, you know, when you have the near death experience and then they see how they treated others and see through their perspective. It's almost like she's having a life review here and now. That's really cool.
Well, it's what it's doing is that they're already tapping into their awareness and their origins because they're bringing those gifts from all over the galaxies. We're talking about many have incarnated as star seeds to bring in their awareness, to help raise frequency, to help raise awareness and understanding that we're not alone, we're part of a galactic community, and to help this planet heal and to change what's going on here because it's going down a very dark path.
Speaking of dark past, and I don't really like going too much down that road because I have learned a little bit about it. But is there any findings you've come across within the secret space program, shadow governments, and things like that? Has any of that sort of information come to your attention that you've learnt about that maybe you'd like to share? Or
Well, there's a lot that come through because of people that are having experiences, not only have experiences on board craft, some of them may be victims of MILAB, which is the military, if you like, abduction, which means that the military do have the technology to do abductions themselves. And they take people to underground bases. And what they're doing is interrogating them to get the information, what happens on the craft, because they want to know what the ETs are doing. They want to find out what people are being taught. They want
right.
to find out the agendas of these different intelligences. And the way to do that is with people who have experiences. If they think they've got a lot of knowledge, they will actually abduct them and they will interrogate them or drug them or whatever. And it's a part of the ET side of this or the ufology that, you know, not everybody wants to admit to because it's humans doing this to humans. And
Yeah.
nobody wants to think that this is going on, but it is.
It's
And
interesting to me to know that they are aware of this and they use the darker aspect to be like, you know, we're not going to tell the human race what we're aware of. And it's almost like they're using it for personal gain rather than fixing, you know, this planet. You know, there could be so much harmony in the world if we could only get our hands on that type of technology and understanding in the way in which they're coming down to help us. But it's like, it's almost strange to me to wrap my head around why the government, wouldn't want to make this planet a better place. It just, I don't understand it. But I think there's other races at play here. Like as everything here on Earth, there's a positive and a negative in the universe, as above, so below. So there obviously are negative forces at play as well, which a lot of times we don't really focus our attention on, but it does exist. And so, what are your thoughts on protection, especially when you're learning this type of work and expanding your consciousness? What kind of protection modalities would you like to share to the audience who are learning about this stuff today?
Well, I think protection is more about what you actually disable yourself with, in the terms of the fact that we are taught really that we aren't powerful, that we have got nothing to give. And this is the message, is unless you've got a piece of paper that says you're something or other, then you're not worth anything anyway. The way they control the planet at the moment is through fear. That is the fear agenda. The fear agenda means everybody shuts down. They don't want to go anywhere. They don't want to go and risk anything, because if it's not viruses, or if it's not things can happen to you. There's a world in chaos and all the rest of it. So this is really good for stopping people from expanding spiritually and in every sense of the word. So first of all is, do you trust yourself? Do you trust who you are? Are you honoring who you are? So this is all about the growth that you look at when you're spiritually starting on your journey, is starting to honor yourself and honor your insights and what have you. The next thing that we're challenged with as a spiritual journey is our ego. There are many people that are gurus out there, but they don't always walk their talk. They may come out with all this wonderful stuff, but when you look at their lives, often their lives are a mess. So they haven't really got the ticket to,
That's it.
so they're
It's really
still,
important what you just said there. I just wanted to interrupt for a minute
yeah,
because not everybody is perfect. So if you put up, a front that says, I am perfect and follow me and this is how it is, and then behind closed doors, you realize they're not as perfect as they let on. But the truth is, no one's perfect. We're all striving to be the best versions of ourselves. So I feel like there's an importance in that message there.
yeah. I think the when you get to the frequency beyond those two,
Mm,
it's very hard for other intelligences, whether they're human or otherwise, to access you, because
mm,
the frequency they can't tap into, especially when we're talking about interdimensionals or beings that feed off fear or feed off ego. They
yeah,
can't feed off the point where you are no longer trapped in those two energies of fear or ego. They can't tap into that. They can't plug into that, because there's nothing they can do. They may affect others around you as a way of disabling you, but they can't disable you. And if you're tuned into your own power and tuned into your team or your higher self and your higher knowing, then you will be given protocols that you need that correct the energy if the energy's not
right.
around you. They'll show you different ways that you can actually be safe. But your energy, when you are in a high frequency, is a wonderful, powerful protector anyway. What I'll say to you is this, in the terms it was said to me, is, do you believe that you're part of the God source or the universal source, whatever name you want to give that intelligence that some people call God? And people say, well, yes, I believe, God's within me and what have you. I said, so if you're part of God, is there anything greater or lesser than that? Well, no. So the only fear you have is that you're thinking something is greater than that, which it isn't. So it's only the way that you interpret that. But if you're part of the God source, there's nothing greater than that. So what are you afraid of?
Exactly right. What are you afraid of? Right. I
Unless you
love
believe
that.
it, unless you believe it to be greater than you, how can
Yeah.
it be? How can it be? Because you are part of the source.
I want to just dive a little bit into the dream state because I know that when I learned this from Peter Slattery, he was talking about different types of abductions But one of them that he brought to mind, which was quite intriguing, was that it's through the astral state. So either or in the dream state, he was talking about UFOs can show up as an apparition, overlap the body, project your consciousness on board a ship, but really you haven't left your bed, you're still in your bed. And that blew me away.
They could even be just a complete non-physical entity, and they're projecting the flying saucer, and you could even walk on it, and it's not real. It's all actually, a projection from consciousness. But
Oh,
yeah, it does overlap into the experience too of you can be in your bed.
None of this is real.
You might hear like a whoomp, 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 it's like, I say it's like a very low bass sound with a very high, sometimes Tibetan singing bowl noise. That can be the craft in apparition form, overlapping our reality, land on you. And if you're sensitive enough, it might feel like you're having a dream, even though you're lucid dreaming, and you're in bed and you can see them in your mind's eye. They could vibrate you on board the craft that way, to where you're now on the craft. You haven't gone anywhere. You're just overlapping your reality.
Just your consciousness transfer?
Yeah, or they can pull the consciousness out and put it into an avatar body to where all of a sudden you're in another body.
So I thought it would be fun to kind of dive into the different types of abduction for those who are just learning, but also the dream state. I myself have had quite a few dreams, and I didn't realize until I met Peter that I've actually had these abductions. I never knew that you could have an abduction through dream state. And so I learned that myself, and that was mind blowing. So yeah, take us a little bit through dream state. But again, I've also had negative and very, very negative, but very, very positive. So maybe take us through why we would have negative and why we may have positive. Yeah.
Well, there's two questions there. The first one is what we did when I'm one of the founders of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, which is Dr. Rudy Shield, Ray Hernandez, and obviously Dr. Edgar Mitchell created it. And we did an intensive survey of 4,200 people, 600 questions globally in 10 countries. And that's in UFOs, beyond UFOs. It's all about consciousness. And one of the things we discovered was that out of that 4,200 people, they said that most of their experiences, which is 75% of their experiences, were out of body. Only 25% were physical. So that's 75.
There you go.
Okay. So that in itself is telling you that this isn't always a physical body. And I'm just trying to remember, what was the second part of the question again? Oh yes, the negative side of experiences. Let me explain what a 9-year-old told me. He's been trained, he said, to deal with all energies by these intelligences that are part of his soul group, okay, it's his star family. So he's explaining that he can do clearings. He's been taught how to work with negative energies and clear them and what have you. And he says, now, he says, at night, I go out of body. And if a child is being harassed by these entities, I clear them.
Wow.
So what I'm saying is all experience is a way of us for learning. It's a part of the soul's growth, and it empowers us once we realize how powerful we are. And if you think about experience, the way you learn the most is through the most difficult challenges that you have. It's not when you get everything right. It's when you don't get everything right that you do your most learning and your most spiritual gain. So we're here in a duality to learn from the dark as well as the light.
I just got all over body goosebumps when you said that. my modality and my way of being now at the journey where I am is, come on, spirit, give me what you got. Teach me what you need to teach me. Take me where I need to go. The best way to learn is hands-on experience. So I love that you just said that. All over goosebumps. Absolutely incredible. Well, what I'll do now is maybe go into psychic ability, the clairs, using the senses in order to understand the energies around us. Because I understand you also dived into that yourself to learn for yourself. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, one of the things that I think we grow up with in many cases, especially if it's been in a very religious scenario, for example, is there's often a caveat over anything where you work with your multidimensional self, your intuition, whether you're tapping in and seeing things or whatever. It's considered a no-no and dangerous, and the demons are going to get you. That's the way you're taught, okay? To me, that's shutting you down, because ultimately we are multidimensional. We are a spirit having a human experience, not the other way around. So what that really means is, because we shut down, we don't trust what we get. I've met so many experiences that say they were talking to the beings, they had their special friend who might be blue, they were shown things, they may have precognitive dreams, but as soon as they talked about it to their family or whatever, the family said, you can't do that, that's dangerous, you're going to be, something terrible is going to happen to you. They'd be frightened into shutting down, or their religion shut them down because they're saying it's dangerous and what have you. But we are multidimensional beings. We're meant to operate that way. And the bottom line is that I initially thought that there was only certain people that had the gift. What I'm seeing now is they were just more, if you like, helped to retain that awareness due to their environment or whatever, whereas many of the rest that were also aware didn't realize it and were shut down. So what's happening now, of course, is many of those that shut down as a child due to various circumstances, education, belief systems around that time or whatever, are starting to be activated because of the frequencies, because of what's going on the planet, because of these intelligences helping. And they're opening up and they're realizing that, their intuition is very powerful. They start to sense things or feel things. And one of the things I would say is, do you see balls of light with your eyes? Or do you feel presences around you? Do you get information in your head you haven't consciously learned? And they'll go, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. I said, now, where does that come from? And usually that's the big block, because they'll say, well, I'm not really sure. Some will say, well, I think it's from my higher self or my oversoul or whatever, which is also true. But often we're helped by other intelligences as well. So, I've met many intuitives and I'll say, so where is the source of your extra information? They'll say, I don't really know. I'll say, don't you think you ought to find out? Because that's the next. And I've met many that work as, readers and mediums and what have you. And they're not always sure. Some are, but some are not sure where their source of information comes from. I said, well, it's like talking to your best friend behind a wooden door. Isn't it time you opened the door and found out who they are?
I agree. I can actually add to that real quick, because during my journey on this podcast, I've opened up myself. I've found out that I can do mediumship. I am very psychic in nature. I didn't know any of this. And I thought that, my being able to read people was just common sense. I thought it was normal. I thought that, when you met someone and you kind of just know things about them, I thought that was just kind of normal. Coming to learn that, look, on one aspect, it is normal because, like you said, we all do have this ability, and it is somewhat a skill, because when you're born into a reality where you're programmed and conditioned and to use your analytical mind rather than your creative mind, it puts you in kind of a predicament of not being able to use the sensory part of you. So, everyone has this gift and ability, but and I forgot where I was going with this. Oh, there you go. So as I'm learning this mediumship, psychic ability, like you said, I don't know who I'm talking to. I have no idea who my guides are. So I love that you brought that up, because maybe this is where I can learn and ascend a little bit more, is how do we get to know who they are? How do we open the door, so to speak?
Well, there's a way of defragging the hard drive, as I call it, with all those old programs. And there is a process, a program that I work with people where I take them into a space where we're talking to the higher self, the oversoul, and saying, now's the time to release all programs, all implants, all blocks, anything that's preventing you from being all that you now wish to be. So it's an instruction to that higher self. And in that process, then releasing that from this lifetime or any other. So that after that, when you take them through the energy shift, they then are ready to see who's around. And there's always an energetic signature with each intelligence that works with you. It's always very different. So, you know, you'll have your life guide maybe with one particular feeling in your body. It might be something feeling around your throat or your head or your shoulder. There'll be an energy there that's saying, I'm here. And that, you know, we'll always know who that is. Then we say, right, let's see what you look like, because we want to have a photograph. We want to, because that helps bring it into 3D. It helps us with the tangibility and the confidence. The more we understand about who we're working with, the more confident you're going to be, rather than this kind of ethereal kind of something, which, you know, we're 3D creatures as well. We need to have the tangibility.
You just gave me an aha moment. So some of the people I interviewed from the Secret Space program would describe these alien beings, the Greys, reptilians. And, you know, some people believe that alien beings are just light. However, you just sparked an idea in me. Do you believe, or would you say that these light beings are only light beings when they come into the third dimension, because that's how we can perceive them? But if, say, we, you know, astral traveled and went to the Pleiades, or maybe if we reincarnated on the Pleiades, we would be in yet another physical body. And so what is the light body, and why do they appear to be in a light body and not physical? And are they physical? Aren't they? I know there's a whole heap of different questions in there, but hopefully we can get to the bottom of it. I just thought of it. Yeah.
Well, the surveys that we did, what people don't realize is that the most seen are the humanoids or the light beings. They're the ones that most people see. The greys are further down the track, and the tall greys and all these other ones, the mantis and all the rest of it. What is interesting when you get someone to be shown their guide, it can be, this being can be all different forms. It can be a blue being, you know, or it can be a tall white being. It can be a mantis being. And they don't, you know, people say, it's looking like a praying mantis. And I'm saying, yeah, intelligence is. They'll show you what they want you to see, or you're ready to see. For
Right.
some, if they are interdimensional, they may not have a physical container. They may just be light. And I'll say, well, this one of my guides is just light. So they'll come in a way that you are ready to see, because they're working with your consciousness and they know what you're ready for. If somebody can't see a face, it's because they're not ready to see maybe that it's not human or whatever. But what's fascinating is when you introduce them to their guides, it may be something they don't expect, like, you know, a non-human form. And they're saying, it's actually got funny kind of suckers on the end of its 3 toes or whatever. And completely different to what they would imagine, like a Tibetan monk or an, you know, or American Indian, or, you know, the standard guides that everybody thinks. So it can surprise them. What they need to do then is find out their history with this particular intelligence. And I'll say, so how many lifetimes have you had together? Have you had any human incarnations together? So what we're doing is building a profile and a background to the being that's supporting them. So they've got real understanding of why that being is, that intelligence is working with them spiritually to help them grow. And also finding out who else is in the team, because often it can be 3 or 4 up to 20, 25, depending on what that soul is learning. There'll be different, and often it can be granddad as well, and or the departed mum or whatever as well, as extra guides and whatever. The more you understand about your non-physical reality, the more confidence you're going to have in tapping into it, because then you've got something tangible. You've got a photograph, you know what they look like, you know what their name is, you know how many lifetimes they've been with you, you know why they're, because that will be another question. What is it you bring to this individual in terms of understanding, help, or support? Well, and then the person will say, oh, they're telling me they do this, they help me with this or whatever. The more that they can connect to that, the more confidence they're going to have, because the bottom line is, while it's still a little bit, you know, ethereal, people always also don't trust themselves when they get stuff, because they think, oh, maybe I'm just imagining it. And I explain to them the difference between imagination and your multidimensional self. It's very, very easy to know. The difference is this: with left brain, you think before you speak. With right brain, you speak before you think. And that's when you get the multidimensional information. How do you know it's not imagination? Like this, for example, because your bedroom's your reality, you know where the door is, you know where the bed is, you know where the windows are and what color the walls are, because it's real. If I said to you, create a bedroom, you'd have to think, well, how big would it be? Where would I put the bed? Where would the windows be? Or whatever. It's a creative process to create a bedroom with your imagination. But if it's coming in with before thought, then that's your connection to your multidimensional self. And that's how you know. That's the difference. Think before you speak is left brain. Right brain is speak before you think. Because thinking alters the information.
It's funny, I always look at myself as a right brain person because I often speak before I think. And sometimes I feel like I look stupid, or I think I said something funny, and the person I'm talking to is like, no, that makes complete sense. I'm like, oh, good. I'm glad it was received that way. So I guess just learning to speak without thought is probably one of the greatest ways to learn to connect to your higher self, because when you're channeling your higher self, or you're channeling beings, higher intelligent beings, it's not coming from your brain. It's not coming from your analytical mind. It's coming from the creative side that's not specifically from you. So you may not understand it at first, but after time you unpack it almost like a downloaded things start to make sense. And so yeah, I do agree that it's important to speak before thinking, which is not what we're taught, which is quite interesting to me.
Well, it stops you. What thinking does is it edits the information.
Right.
What you're doing is actually coloring the integrity of the information if you start to look at it and analyze it and whatever. And it should resonate. It should feel right, even though it's new information or whatever. That often when you may have felt it, that when you come out with something and you think, oh, that's pretty profound, and you get a buzz because it feels so right, that's telling you it is absolutely spot on.
And one other thing that I also wanted to talk about is, the importance of the DNA, and how we're taught, I think it's a large sum, I can't remember, it was like 90 something or 70 something % of our DNA is considered junk DNA. Have you come to find any knowledge on this and what it really is? And should we be activating this so-called junk DNA, so to speak? What have you come to find in regards to DNA?
Well, I'm glad you've mentioned that, because that's the tangibility of who we are, is the fact that it appears to be that we're intelligently designed, perhaps, as some sources say, as many as 12 different species, some are saying 22. So we have got inserts from a number of different intelligences visiting this planet. So when you say you're a starseed, I mean, we are the aliens. I mean, we have been created primarily from the indigenous people on this planet, plus these inserts from other intelligences as well. The interesting thing with that is that we are being activated, and the children are particularly activating. I talk about in the New Human, the ones that are often seen as dysfunctional with ADHD or Asperger's or dyslexia or autism or whatever. They're seen as dysfunctional. What they are is operating differently. And they're operating differently, and it's harder to program them, which is a good thing, because it enables them to then bring in their awareness and their gifts and their understanding. So they are often, one of the interesting ways that ADHD was translated by a lovely friend of mine, Neil Gore in Hong Kong, was always dialed into higher dimensions, is the ADHD. And that what do? We actually medicate that child to bring them down to a lower frequency so they can be programmed into this unlimited 3D reality that we're in, rather than allowing them to expand and see things in a more multidimensional way. They are the new ones, the new humans coming in. But we all have that within us. It's just, for many at the moment, it's not activated yet. But it's being activated. It's being activated when people start to meditate, do healing protocols, have a shamanic wake-up call, for example, or start to have out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences. All of those will activate more of that awareness, and people start to end up talking to different intelligences, going in different places, becoming aware they're going to other dimensions, different timelines, parallel universes. This is our normal, state as a soul, is we can do all of that. but it's all been changed through the compromising of our DNA. But that in itself has much to offer us in terms of, people don't realize that in 1 gram of DNA, you can have put all the information on the internet in 1 gram of DNA. So what is
Wow.
hidden in our DNA? Just think about that for a minute. How
Mm.
much of our DNA, what is it holding? What is the information there that is slowly being activated when we are realizing we are in a process of not only activation, but ascension?
What's one of the key ways to begin to start activating? I know that you said that it is being activated, but we as powerful beings, how can we understand to, fasten the process so that we can start the new earth? Or am I just being impatient? Because tell me.
The bottom line is, the mere fact that you have a desire to change and to grow and what have you is enough. Then it's about your superconscious higher self to decide how that will unfold for you. For some, as I say, it will unfold when they get drawn to a healing modality. For others, it may unfold through meditation. For somebody else, it may unfold because they have a near-death experience. So each soul has its own timing for this to happen. And it happens in a way, we've got to be aware that if it happens too rapidly, we may not cope with it. It's also a process, because otherwise, look at your awareness now compared to your awareness a few years ago.
Oh,
Would
yeah.
you take that on board? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah, I get it. It's a slow process. And it took me, I think, about 2 years to get to where I am now. So absolutely agree with what you just said. And I wouldn't have the progression of understanding to where I am now had it just happened like that. So guys who are listening to this now and you want to level up, ascend, take it slow. Don't be so impatient like some of us. And know that everything happens the way it should. Every situation, circumstance, whether positive or negative, is a learning experience, as Mary said earlier. And you will come to a point where you look back and you go, that makes sense now, right? So enjoy the journey, enjoy being human as well. That's another thing I wanted to quickly bring up before we end the podcast. But a lot of people in the spiritual community tend to want to escape this reality. They don't want to be here anymore. But I've honestly come full circle and believe that it is a gift to be here on this earth. And maybe we can dive a little bit into that before we end.
Well, it's a good one, because I meet many, many starseeds that say, I don't like it here. I don't want to be here. I want to go home. And I say, well, I'm going to be like the headmistress of a boarding school called Earth, and say to you, you've come here for your term to learn and to grow, and you'll go home when you've done your job or you've learned what you've needed to learn. So that's the deal, mate, because we've all agreed to this. And we may not have realized it was going to be that hard. But the bottom line is that we have the awareness and the skills and the understanding to be able to really cope with whatever it is, even though it seems overwhelming at the time. And they've come because we're at such an amazing, crucial time in Earth history, in its spiritual history, in terms of, we're here to see an amazing change. And that is a gift, even though we knew it was, before we came, it was going to be rough. Even though some said, I didn't realize it was going to be that rough. But I say,
yeah, it's a great time to be alive right now, guys.
That's right. We're here to see the finale, and it's going to be something pretty amazing.
Amen. I guess I was going to say, could you leave us with a positive note? But I feel like you just did it. So I guess for the viewers watching today, just quickly tell them about this event you have coming up. Also, if you want to get in touch with Mary, how can they find you? And yeah.
Well, the Awakening event is in Bundaberg. It's over the winter solstice. I think it's the 20th to the 22nd or whatever. Very first time in Bundaberg. There's going to be many, many Indigenous speakers, which is going to be incredible, including, and then there'll be myself talking about the new human and the children. And there's another wonderful starseed, Lee Capitelli, who calls herself a Homo Novus, has come here to help activate people as well. She's a wonderful soul, and I've mentioned her in the new human. She's gorgeous. So it's the first time of this kind of event. So I think it's going to be really, really special because we're connecting the cultures through this event, which I think is going to be amazing. And you can find me on, just Google my name, you'll see ACERN comes up and many others. I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Telegram. So there's many ways to find me.
Awesome. Well, Mary, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm pinching myself. I cannot believe I'm sitting in front of you right now. The alien lady, the UFO knowledge with all this incredible wisdom. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. And I really hope we cross paths again. It was a pleasure to have you.
Absolute pleasure, Natalie. And thank you again for inviting me.